Chapter 1. New Blood. There's a rule in Chicago that nobody tells you about, not in words. You just feel it with your skin. If you work downtown, in those glass towers by the river, you're only as loyal as your last win. And if you want to stay in the game, you'd better learn to watch your back. They called our agency Brick and Banner, as if strength and hype could coexist in one ugly logo. I'd been here 9 years, climbing from intern to account director, surviving more layoffs than I cared to count. In marketing, you don't make friends, you make alliances. That was my mantra, and I stuck to it like a cigarette after a sleepless night. Everything was running on rails until Julia Price showed up. HR sent the usual email. Join us in welcoming Julia, our new head of strategic initiatives. The attachment had her photo, Ivy League smile, perfect hair, resume that read like a LinkedIn fever dream. The moment she shook my hand, crisp, businesslike, no-nonsense grip, I knew someone at the top wanted to play Checkmate, not Shashki. The first week, Julia moved like a ghost. She watched, took notes, never interrupted. 2 days in, she found a typo in a client proposal that slipped past 5 editors. By Friday, she was already grabbing coffee with Michael from finance, the one guy whose spreadsheets could tank a campaign before it even left the pitch deck. My buddy Scott, a lifer in digital, leaned over my desk. You see the way she asks questions? Like she already knows the answers. Maybe she does, I said, trying to sound like I didn't care. But I cared. Everyone did. Because in our line of work, when someone this sharp lands without a parachute, it means turbulence is coming. You think your office politics are bad? Wait till you see what happens when everyone's job is on the line. And the only rule is, don't blink first. Stay tuned, because one missed email can cost you everything. By the end of the month, Julia had her own crew. The young, the hungry, the ones who smelled blood in the water. She started pushing for radical transparency, daily stand-ups, accountability spreadsheets. Most of us smiled, nodded, rolled our eyes, but quietly people started coming in earlier, leaving later, triple-checking emails. You'd be amazed what a whiff of fear does to productivity. One Monday, I found a note on my desk. Performance review, Thursday, 3 p.m., JP. No, please. No, let's chat. Just my name and her initials, like a verdict. As I sat in that overheated glass conference room, Julia clicked her pen and didn't bother with small talk. Let's cut through the fluff, Eric. I've looked at your numbers. Solid, but you're too comfortable. I need someone who fights for every dollar, not just someone who manages decline. Are you that guy, or should I find someone who is? The air tasted of burnt coffee and old carpet glue. I swallowed, smiled my tightest smile, and said, I'm whoever you need me to be. She stared, long, like she was measuring me for a new suit or a coffin. We'll see. By Thursday night, half the office was buzzing. Julia was asking questions, digging into old files, reading between lines nobody wanted her to notice. Someone said she'd already had drinks with the COO, and not the HR kind. Caught Scott in the hallway. She's not here to play nice. Someone's getting cut, and I think it's soon. He didn't disagree, just patted my shoulder and said, better be her than us. Chapter 2. The Whisper Network. By the second month, it wasn't just the work that changed. It was the air itself, electric and sharp. Every morning, the elevator felt like a pressure cooker. You could spot the anxious ones by how they clutched their coffee cups, white-knuckled, eyes darting to see who else was riding up to the 15th floor. Julia's radical transparency was working. It didn't bring us closer. It just made everyone paranoid. People stopped eating lunch together. Slack channels went quiet, then sprang to life late at night with frantic DMs. Did you hear what happened to Rachel in sales? Julia asked for everyone's Q2 numbers. Why? Heard about Tom? He's meeting HR at 3. Could be you next. It wasn't just fear. It was the sense that you were always being watched. Not by cameras, but by your own coworkers, hungry for scraps of information. Old alliances began to fracture. I saw my friend Janet, once the office den mother, close her laptop the moment I walked by. Scott, usually the king of useless chatter, had gone radio silent. One Monday, Julia held a town hall. Everyone crammed into the big glass conference room. She stood up front, iPad in hand, and smiled that politician's smile. I know change can be tough, she said, voice perfectly modulated, But we're not here to coast. I want fighters. I want hustlers. If you have ideas, bring them. If you see something wrong, speak up. No more secrets. That's how we'll win." Everyone nodded, some out of habit, others out of fear. She made eye contact with me, held it just long enough for the message to land. I'm not here to make friends. After that, the real games began. Suddenly, reports started leaking. Feedback that was supposed to be private ended up in public folders. I found a note in my inbox. "Eric, some people feel you aren't pulling your weight on the Miller account. We should discuss." No signature, no explanation. Just an anonymous accusation, floating like poison. I confronted Scott after work. "You hear anything about this? Someone's saying I'm dropping the ball." He shook his head, but didn't meet my eye. "I don't know, man. People are nervous. Nobody wants to be next." That's when I noticed Janet talking to Julia in the kitchen, whispering, too close, both glancing my way. It hit me. The alliances weren't just breaking, they were realigning, fast. Ever wonder how fast a rumor can end a career? You won't believe how quickly trust crumbles, until it's your name on the chopping block. Stay tuned. Because in this office, the person you trust most today might sell you out tomorrow. A week later, Julia sent out a new company-wide email. Anonymous feedback will be reviewed for all major projects. Radical accountability requires radical honesty. In other words, anyone could take a shot at you, and you'd never know who pulled the trigger. From that point on, every meeting was a chess match. Every compliment felt like a setup. I triple-checked every line in my emails, every number in my presentations. You'd think this would make us stronger, but it just made us meaner. And then, the first real casual. Tom, the creative lead, didn't show up Monday morning. His desk was empty, his chair already claimed by someone from Julia's crew. HR said, "He's pursuing new opportunities." We all knew what that meant. He was gone, and we never even got to say goodbye. The office went silent for a day. Then people started talking, quietly, in twos and threes, in stairwells and parking garages. The whisper network was born. Now, information was currency. If you knew something about someone, anything, you suddenly had leverage. But what I didn't know, my name was already being whispered too. Chapter 3. The Knife in the Back. If you've never been betrayed at work, let me tell you, it doesn't feel like a stab, not at first. It feels like a chill, like the heater cuts out in January and no one offers you their jacket. The worst part? The signs are always there. You just choose not to see them until it's too late. After Tom's quiet disappearance, nobody sat at his desk. Julia's crew claimed his spot, but his ghost haunted the office, an unspoken warning for anyone getting too comfortable. The Whisper Network was now in overdrive. I kept my head down, focusing on the Miller account, trying not to give anyone an excuse. But I noticed the subtle shifts. Janet, who used to eat lunch with me twice a week, now sat with Julia's group, laughing a little too loudly at their jokes. Scott stopped sharing memes and only talked business. When you asked about weekend plans, people changed the subject. It was like living among strangers who wore the faces of friends. That Friday, Julia called me into her office. The blinds were down, her desk was immaculate. No family photos, just a notebook and a glass of water. "Eric," she began, "I've been hearing mixed feedback about your leadership. Some say you're coasting, that you're not bringing fresh ideas to the table." I could feel the air thicken. "From who?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Feedback is anonymous now, remember? Not about who said it. It's about how we respond." I almost laughed, but I'd seen enough blood on the carpet to know this wasn't a bluff. She continued, "Look, you've been here a long time, maybe too long. Sometimes legacy employees resist change. I need to know, are you on board with the new direction, or are you holding us back?" That's when it hit me. This wasn't a performance review. It was an ultimatum. "I'm not resisting anything," I said carefully. "But I do think some of the changes are making people nervous. There's a lot of tension in the office." She didn't miss a beat. "That's natural. Change is uncomfortable, but I can't have doubt. If you can't champion this, Eric, I'll have to find someone who can. Think you know who your friends are at work? Think again. In a world of anonymous feedback and shifting loyalties, the person you trust most might be the one holding the knife. Keep watching, because sometimes survival means choosing which part of you gets cut. The following week, I started noticing weird gaps in my emails. Threads where someone had clearly deleted messages, accidentally left me off CCs, or replied all with cryptic half answers. My access to the Miller Project files was suddenly under review. When I asked Scott, he just shrugged. Not my call, man. It says Julia's doing a data audit, but I knew that wasn't the whole story. The next day, Janet caught me by the elevator. Eric, she said quietly, I thought you should know. Julia asked me for notes on how you manage the team. She's been collecting opinions for weeks. My stomach dropped. Did you? She hesitated. I told her you're the best manager I've ever worked with. But Eric, they're all nervous. People are saying you're not adapting. I don't know what's going on anymore. I thanked her and rode the elevator down in silence. My hands shook. This wasn't just office politics now. It was a full-scale purge. That night, I stayed late, combing through old files, trying to see what Julia was after. At 8:15 p.m., I heard voices outside the conference room, Julia and Michael from finance. I ducked behind a filing cabinet and listened. He's not a team player, Julia was saying. We need someone who will execute, not someone stuck in the past. If he doesn't step up, I want his transition plan by end of month. Michael sighed. He's delivered every quarter for years. Are you sure? Loyalty is great, Julia snapped, but dead weight is dead weight. If we want to survive, we cut what holds us back. I waited until they left. Only then did I realize the knife wasn't in my back yet, but the blade was out, and they were already arguing about who would twist it. The next morning, Julia sent out a company-wide memo. Effective immediately, Eric will be transitioning out of his role on the Miller account. A new project lead will be announced shortly. Just like that, 9 years of loyalty reduced to a single line in a cold email. By lunch, my inbox was full of sorry to hear and let's catch up soon from people who wouldn't meet my eyes in the hallway. Scott left a post-it on my monitor. Told you to watch your back. The worst part? I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I was numb. Because deep down, I knew you never see the knife until it's too late. Chapter 4. Burn notice. If you ever think losing a project is the worst that can happen, you've never been the target of a corporate purge. Losing Miller was just the warning shot. The real battle started the morning after, when HR summoned me with a polite but cold invitation. Eric, please come to conference room B at 9 a.m. for a brief discussion regarding company protocol. If you've been in this game long enough, you know company protocol is code for start packing. I walked in, pulse hammering, mind rehearsing every mistake I might have made in the last 9 years. Julia was there, expression unreadable, and so was Mark from HR, clipboard in hand, face like he was prepping for a colonoscopy. Eric, Mark began, we've received a few concerns regarding your recent conduct. There's been talk of friction with the new leadership and possible breaches of confidentiality. Translation, someone had been feeding them stories. I glanced at Julia. She didn't flinch. No one offered me coffee. Mark laid out the concerns in bullet points. Missed deadlines. Never mind they were due to last-minute changes from her team. Lack of collaboration, creating a toxic atmosphere. It was a joke, except no one was laughing. I defended myself point by point, methodically, like I'd learned from the best. Mark nodded. Julia didn't blink. Every answer I gave was scribbled down, but I could tell. The verdict had been written before I even walked in. While we conduct this review, Mark said, we'll be restricting your access to company systems. We expect full cooperation. Please work from home until further notice. The message was clear. I was out, just not officially. Yet. Think you're safe because you follow the rules? Think again. In corporate America, rules are just the starting line. The real game is who controls the narrative. Don't blink, or you might miss the moment your story gets rewritten. I left with a box of my stuff and a company-issued temporary leave letter. By the time I reached the elevator, Slack had already logged me out. My email, frozen. I texted Scott, but got no reply. Janet called once, hung up before I could answer. The next days blurred. My phone buzzed with HR updates. We're looking into the matter. Thank you for your patience. Please refrain from discussing company matters with colleagues. At first, I tried to fight it. Gathered emails, calendar invites, even Slack screenshots where Julia's instructions had changed midstream. I drafted a timeline, annotated every concern Mark had raised. I even tried reaching out to a lawyer, but the retainer was more than my last 3 paychecks combined. Then the guilt started. Was I the toxic one? 9 years building something. Maybe I'd become blind to my own habits. At night, I replayed every meeting. Did I shut someone down too hard? Did I really resist change, or just the chaos? But the real gut punch came a week later, when I heard Janet and Scott had been called in for internal interviews. Not only that, Julia had launched a full-blown culture audit. Anyone who'd ever worked with me was asked about my leadership, my attitude, my fit. They didn't call it a witch hunt, but everyone knew what it was. I called Scott. He finally answered, voice flat. "Sorry, man. They asked if I ever saw you. Go off on someone. Lose your temper." I said no, didn't matter. They already know what they want to find. Janet, she's scared, thinks she'll be next. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. Julia was burning the ground behind her, making sure nothing and no one could threaten her new regime. By Friday, rumors were everywhere. Eric's been stealing credit. Eric's a bully. Eric's refusing to train the new hires. It didn't matter that none of it was true. The more I tried to explain, the more I sounded guilty. FOMO. Break. Ever watched your reputation go up in flames and there's nothing you can do? It's not about what happened. It's about what everyone believes. And once the fire starts, the truth is just more fuel. Late that night, Janet sent me a single text. "I'm sorry." No explanation, no comfort. Just 2 words that said everything. Sitting alone, staring at the screen, I realized the purge wasn't about performance. It was about power. And survival meant finding a way to fight fire with fire, or risk being erased completely. Chapter 5. Gambit. They say every man has his breaking point. Mine wasn't the demotion, the accusations, or even the friends who went silent. It was the night I found myself staring at my own reflection in the living room window, watching the city lights flicker, while I wondered if 9 years of loyalty had been nothing more than a bad investment. That's when something snapped. If the rules of the game were rigged, I had nothing left to lose by playing dirty. I started with the documentation I'd collected. Emails, Slack threads, calendar invites, screenshots of last-minute pivots Julia ordered, but later blamed on me. My timeline was bulletproof, annotated to show who made each decision, who signed off, and when. Years working with the best had taught me. Never fight the person, fight the process, and never leave a paper trail unless you're ready to use it. But I knew information wasn't enough. Julia controlled the story. If I wanted a shot, I needed allies, or at least leverage. I called in a favor from an old client, Linda, now a senior executive at a rival agency. We met for coffee, far from downtown, no risk of being spotted by Julia's loyalists. "I've heard the rumors," Linda said, eyes sharp. "They're painting you as toxic. What's really happening?" I laid it all out, the shifting directives, the culture audit, the sudden anonymous complaints. Linda listened, frowning. "Sounds like they want you gone so they can install someone loyal to her. Let me guess, new team, new contracts?" "Already in motion," I said. "She's burning the old guard. I need to land on my feet and make sure she can't do this to anyone else." Linda nodded. "Let's see your evidence. I'll have my legal guy review it. Meanwhile, you might want to reach out to a few folks still inside, quietly. You're not the only one she's targeted. Ever wanted to see what corporate revenge really looks like? Stay close. Sometimes it's not about justice. It's about survival and making sure the next knife isn't aimed at you." That night, I made discreet calls. Janet was hesitant, scared, but agreed to send me her Slack logs. Scott, after a long silence, finally forwarded a thread where Julia had instructed the team to shift blame upwards if KPIs weren't met. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. I documented a pattern. Julia's radical transparency was just a cover for clearing out anyone with enough history to question her. She was running out the old team, rewriting records, and building her empire from the ashes. But a gambit means risking everything. Before I went nuclear, I had to be sure. I emailed Mark from HR, formally requesting all feedback and complaints submitted against me, citing my right to review under company policy. He replied, "Your request has been forwarded to legal. Please do not discuss this further." The next morning, I got a call from legal, not HR. Their tone was suddenly very polite. Eric, we'd like to clarify a few things about your documentation and recent claims. Can you join a meeting this afternoon? That was my signal. The evidence had landed. For the first time in weeks, I felt the balance shift, even if just a little. At the meeting, legal was all business. They asked about specific emails, calendar events, who had final approval on Miller, why certain files had been deleted. I answered everything, calmly, methodically, just like I'd practiced. When they asked about the culture audit, I produced the logs Janet and Scott had shared, along with annotated notes highlighting inconsistencies. One lawyer raised an eyebrow. You kept detailed records. I looked him in the eye. Someone had to. Afterwards, word got around that Julia's team was being internally reviewed. A day later, Julia herself called me, not from her office, but from a blocked number. You think you've won something, Eric? All you've done is slow things down. In this business, nobody's indispensable. Remember that. The call ended before I could answer. You ever get so close to victory that you can taste it? But you know the next move could end everything? That's where I was. One wrong step, and it's checkmate. But for which side? I didn't sleep that night, but for the first time since it started, I wasn't scared. I was ready. Chapter 6. Checkmate. There's a myth in business that the truth always wins. The real world, sometimes the truth is just another weapon, and only the last person standing gets to tell the story. The morning after the legal meeting, the office felt different, as if the air pressure had changed. The rumor mill, so feverish for weeks, was eerily silent. Even Julia's crew looked nervous, eyes flicking from their screens to the glass conference rooms, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I worked from home, checking email every 10 minutes, waiting for some sign. At noon, a calendar invite landed in my inbox. All staff meeting, 2 p.m., mandatory. The message was simple, but the subtext screamed something big was coming. At 2 o'clock sharp, I logged into the video call. The whole company was there. Faces small and pixelated, forced smiles barely masking dread. Mark from HR took the lead. We want to address some recent concerns and clarify our commitment to fairness, he began, his tone as neutral as paint drying. After a thorough review, we've determined that some of the feedback processes were not followed in accordance with company policy. A pause. My heartbeat hammered. Moving forward, we'll be making some changes to our leadership structure. Effective immediately, Julia Price will be stepping down from her role as head of strategic initiatives. There it was. For a second, the only sound was the hum of a dozen muted microphones. Julia's camera was off. Not a word, not a face. Just silence, heavy as concrete. Mark continued, "We want to thank Eric for his cooperation and dedication. There will be no further action taken. We encourage everyone to use our updated reporting channels if you have concerns." The call ended as abruptly as it had begun. No questions, no goodbyes. Just a mass exodus from the digital meeting, and a company left to pick up the pieces. Ever see a queen fall off the board in one move? It's never about justice. It's about who controls the story when the dust settles. Don't blink, or you'll miss the real winners. I sat in my living room, staring at the laptop. Relief? Not really. The company would never be the same, and neither would I. I'd won, but what was left to win? Scott texted, "You did it. Drinks on me. When you're ready." Janet called, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry for everything, Eric. I didn't know who to trust. Nobody did." "Me neither," I said. "But it's over now, for both of us." Over the next week, the office settled into an uneasy calm. Julia was gone. Some of her closest allies left quietly, others tried to blend back in. The company launched new wellness initiatives, more HR workshops, endless talk of team spirit. But everyone knew something fundamental had broken, and no memo could glue it back together. I went back in on a Monday. My badge still worked. The security guard gave me a polite nod, but his eyes lingered, like he was wondering if I'd last another week. My desk was just as I'd left it. Papers, a half-dead succulent, the best manager mug from last year's holiday party. I sat down, logged in, and started the work I'd always done. But nothing felt the same. I was different. Maybe stronger, maybe just older. The scars were real. And so was the knowledge that, in this game, winning meant knowing when to walk away. As I packed up that Friday, Scott caught me at the elevator. "You sticking around?" he asked. I shrugged. "For now. But I'm not playing the same game anymore." He grinned. "Maybe that's what it takes. Survive long enough to make your own rules." The elevator doors closed, and for the first time in months, I didn't look over my shoulder. Maybe it wasn't a clean victory, but it was mine. And in the end, that was enough.